The Marinade.
There's no O in marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Used to be a young man, was all of 21. I had no problems, no.
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 125, and our guest is David Newbould. David is a singer and songwriter originally from Toronto who now makes his home in Nashville. He has 7 official releases under his belt, from full-length studio albums to EPs to live recordings. His music has been featured in TV shows and films such as Criminal Minds and Dawson's Creek. His latest in a line of wonderful records was released last year. It is called Power Up, and it's been on heavy rotation during my morning commute. This was such a pleasure to record, y'all. It gives me great joy to bring you my conversation with David Newbould. All right. Hey, man, thanks for doing this. So I'm looking forward to, we made it happen. I'm looking forward to, thanks for your patience. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Very cool.
Yeah, extremely cool. I've been spending a lot of time with your music, and specifically Power Up. And doing research for this, I always try to dive as deep as I can into a guest's discography, and then also whatever I can find press-wise and so forth. And as I was going through there, I didn't find a lot about sort of like your origin as a musician, kind of like the origin story of you as a musician, and like when you started playing music, and was it all around you as a kid? Like starting there, if we could, just kind of going backwards and kind of getting a sense of what music was like for you growing up.
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for asking. I didn't come from a particularly musical family. Like, my grandmother played piano all her life, and she taught and all that. But outside of that, it was a fairly tone-deaf household. This is I grew up in Toronto, in Canada.
Yeah, right.
And my mother at some point, she came home from a garage sale with an old beat up nylon string guitar when I was probably 4 or 5, and I didn't have too much interest in that. And I started playing piano around 8 or 9. But I think what really started it was singing in church, in school choir and church choir for about 3-4 years. Between the age of about 9 and 12, I developed a great love of singing, and then stuff on the radio starting around the age of 9 or 10 I really took to. My folks split up when I was 9, and it really sent me to I got pretty lost pretty quick, and I found salvation pretty quickly in like radio and music, and it started from there. And then I started playing drums. I was a really passionate drummer from the ages of about 10 till 13 or 14, and just playing along with my records. And I started a band with a couple of friends, and then eventually I kind of switched to playing guitar. And mostly throughout my teenage years, I was all about playing guitar, not singing, not writing songs, just playing guitar. And then yeah, and then probably when I discovered guys like Neil Young and Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, people like that, I realized there was more to it even than just playing guitar.
Yeah.
And so I I just immersed myself in that ever since then. And I moved. I don't know how fast you want me to go.
Well, I'm so yeah. Let's stop for a second because I'm interested in that the drumming part, and I did catch that. It may have been on the Americana Station podcast. Shout out to Will Payne Harrison and the Americana Station podcast. You were on there with India Ramey. It was a wonderful listen, and it may have been there that I heard, or maybe I read somewhere else that you had kind of really played a lot of drums as a young person. How much do you think that informs your songwriting? Because like when I listen to your music, like, and we're gonna get a little bit more into this later, but especially with Power Up, there is a driving sound to it. There's a driving feeling to it, and I wonder how much that growing up playing drums, how much that impacted your songwriting maybe later.
You know, consciously, I don't know, but subconsciously probably, because I can't, I started with like, well, early on pop radio when I was 9, 10, but pretty soon into, kind of hard rock and roll. And, and I've always, I guess that's always been part of my origin story, is that. So it never stays too soft for too long, I guess. I like to play acoustic guitar and have a sort of dialogue going on in the songs, but there's always kind of an underlying force that I kind of like, or movement. And plus with this record, Scott Sachs produced it and he played most of the drums on it. And he's a headstrong drummer, and so a lot of it, there was even a few songs where I came in and was like, well, maybe we should just try this train beat, and he goes, how about this? Boom, bop. I'm like, yeah, the boom bop really seems to be working for me. Yeah. But
it is really working for you. It is really working for you. And I think, especially as I was like going through your whole catalog, there's more of that on this to me, quite a bit more of that on this record, Power Up, the most recent record. And it lends itself like a, Power Up is a quarantine record, right? It's one that was made and somewhat written during quarantine. And so many of those are beautiful pieces of art, but they're also really hard. They're really difficult to listen to. And you did such a good job with like taking on kind of these really tough things and these heavy themes at times. And it doesn't feel like that. It just sonically, it's just like kind of feels like I want to get up and move my body. I mean, I want to shake it around a little bit, and I do. And I'm in the car and I'm singing and I'm dancing around, but at the same time, you're juxtaposing that with such heavy themes. And certainly not the first person to do that, but the way that you did it with at this particular time in this particular space is really, really cool. And I'm really glad that it came out that way, because it takes this something that could otherwise be kind of difficult to palate and it doesn't make it that way. It makes it something I want to shake my ass to.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, I was kind of freed, I think, by the fact that, I didn't go into it like other records where I've said, okay, I'm making this record, I'm going to release it, we're going to try to do this and that with it. I didn't even know, like I had the collection of songs that I wanted to do, that evolved, some were hanging out from earlier and some were written during the time. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't know really I was going to release it. We really just started messing around just out of, well, I wouldn't say boredom, but I mean, everyone was quarantined. My son and his 2 girls are close to the same age, so I went over several times so they could sort of have play dates. And we would just hang out outside, and we just started kind of messing around, and we did the actual song Power Up. And it was so much, it was just so kind of outside of the box. And I thought, hey, well, I got these other songs I've been not sure what to do with. You want to try to cut a couple? And he said, sure, because like we didn't have anything else to do,
Yeah.
So we just slowly turned his garage into a studio, as it, the further it went, the more I was like, this is really a record. But I mean, I wasn't thinking, we were just kind of doing it just for ourselves, And
Mhm.
then at a certain point, I realized this was something I should do something with and put it out. So, and he was just, I think he had that excitement of his garage being turned into a studio and just being able to kind of let loose with all of his different. He's really into percussive elements, and it was cool for me too. It opened me up a lot, and I ended up building my own studio, the next summer, and yeah, it was really fun. It was good. It was fun, even though it was
Yeah.
awkward and weird.
I love that. And I love those moments that we all found during that time. Not, I don't want to go too deep into pandemic talk today, but I do love that anytime you can find, it doesn't necessarily have to be a fucking pandemic. But anytime you can find, a time and place to be able to sort of get yourself out of those routines, get yourself out of a space where you're doing things the same way or doing things in a similar way or approaching your craft in the same way or a similar way. So much good comes out of that, and trying and finding ways to capture those moments. I think that's something lately I haven't been doing a great job of because I've been distracted by other things, right? As some of the things I talked to you about when we were setting this up. And it's just like, I need to be more intentional, right? When things are not necessarily just like, here's this situation where you can get outside the box. Finding ways to be more intentional about creating spaces where you can make stuff that maybe is challenging you in some way that you wouldn't otherwise seek out.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because a lot of the things we came up with were limited by the fact that we were not even in the same room. Essentially, like we built a barricade and a thick plexiglass window, so we kind of had to do things like backing vocals. We'd sort of each go to the edge of the plexiglass and kind of put a microphone in the middle of it and just kind of yell what we were doing from side to side. Because his wife is a cardiologist, see, so we were being extra careful because seeing patients every day.
Yeah.
We really weren't messing around in that regard. So yeah, I see what you're saying. You're talking about, like, so when when you have limitations, you get some great results, and so, but when you're not forced to have limitations, you kind of need to seek out these limitations or seek out.
Yeah, I had a professor in law school. I had this like class, this public speaking class, and it was great because it was super easy. And I like talking. So, but we were in this class, and she would frequently say, and she was referring specifically to having your speech written. And she would say, like, there's nothing wrong with having your talking points, and there's nothing wrong with having it written out, but you're probably better off without your blankie. Right. It's a comfort thing to have it up there. That fucking speech, right? It. It's just that you're now kind of limiting yourself in terms of your cadence. You're limiting yourself in terms of the way that you enunciate. You're thinking more about reading the words on the page or hitting all those points instead of just sort of allowing yourself to give the speech you need to give. And I think a similar thing is true for creation in general, where like, there's nothing wrong with having the blankie, or having the normal routine. It's just that so often when we get outside of that routine, we already have the skill. You've got the muscles, right? You've got the musical muscles. And so to get outside of that, whatever it normally looks like that you're making a thing, and to put yourself in a space where it's coming a lot more from here, I think, than it is from, say, here.
Yeah. And I learned a lot about that doing this record with Scott. Because because the limitations, B, because of, well, the time limitations too. So I like to do things quickly now when I record, and I've been recording in here and playing everything myself, which of course brings a whole different element to things I've done before too. And I like the better I am on the particular instrument, the faster I like to record it. Like, for instance, I'll play the drums and it might take me a couple times till I feel I've got it good enough. And then the guitar, I like to just do it before I even really know the song too well. Just kind of get down, just kind of move with it, and then move on. Because it's like you're saying, you can spend forever, getting it just right. but I like to sort of just go in and try to get it done and just have it be human, you know. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of that came from like the situation we did with this record, where because we had a lot of, it'd be like, okay, we're gonna try to get the guitars for this song today, but at 2 o'clock, we got to go pick up our kids from their pod or whatever. So there were a lot of
Yeah.
there were a lot of takes where like I'd say, okay, let me do it, let me put a background vocal on this, and he'd hit record, and I'd sing the thing, and I'd finish, say Scott, and he'd already like gone upstairs and left. Yeah, I guess that's gonna be the take, because next time I'm here, we're gonna want to do something else.
Yeah. This is kind of an aside, but as you were talking about it, made me think of something I noticed that I started doing since I've been listening to this record is I just say power up as if it's a phrase that we all use. I just sort of like in conversation with somebody will be like, all right, yeah, power up, man, power up. If it fits the moment. And I didn't do it consciously. It wasn't like me going like, I'm gonna steal David's idea. I just was sort of like, it's become a part of my nomenclature, which I think is super fun.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool.
And people sort of people get it too.
Song, isn't it?
Huh?
The goal of any song, isn't it? To try
Right? You're just sort of part of, you're a part of my little slice of the culture, at least. You're a part of it, and your language is a part of it. I just tell people, power up, man, power up. And they get it. It doesn't need explanation. Everybody just gets it. Let's rewind a little bit, because we were talking about sort of your musical upbringing and so forth. And I can relate. I talked to somebody, I'm trying to think who it was recently, but I had someone on the show recently who had a similar situation where, like, for me, music is such a huge, I think about this a lot. Like, music is such a huge part of my life. I obviously do the podcast. I listen to a ton of music. I write songs as a hobby. It's a huge part of my life. And yet there were no instruments around my house. There were records at my grandmother's house, but just a small collection of mostly classic country. We listened to the radio a lot, but it wasn't like I had an uncle who was really hyper into music, or like an older brother who was giving me records or whatever. And so I'm interested in that, just like connecting with you on that level about like, once you get the bug, it sounds like you're playing a bunch of different instruments, learning different instruments. And then you moved to New York City as a very young man. Was that a musical decision? Were you like going to chase the big city fame?
Yes. Well, it didn't originate that. Within the span of about 15 minutes, it went from one thing to that. Well, the full story of that is I had a really dear friend throughout high school, and we were finishing high school, we were graduating at the same time, and she was moving out to British Columbia to move there with a guy that she was kind of involved with, and starting a whole new life adventure. And I remember us sitting on the bleachers at her high school one night, and she was telling me about this, and I was thinking, I got to do something like this. I just can't stay here anymore. And all the reasons that it was kind of one of those decisions that just suddenly hit me in the face, and I realized I'd been coming to it for probably a year or two without actually realizing it. Like I'd had a couple of bands, they just kept dissolving. It was hard to find the drummer we played with was very serious about it, but we couldn't find anyone else who just would take it seriously enough, really.
Yeah.
And it dissolved, and
are these all people around your age? Are they?
Yeah.
Classmates and that kind of thing.
Yeah, classmates and friends and people who thought being in a band would be cool, and it was. But after a while, the work part of it, I was all about rehearsing, trudging to gigs, lugging all the gear, setting up. Like, the whole thing was just perfect for me, But people don't want to practice always. They don't want to play, shitty bars for too long, and I had no problem with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then I just started getting into different stuff, and I just felt it was time I needed to go and start. I just felt I needed to go and start my like adult life elsewhere, and then New York was the obvious choice for me, because all my sort of singer-songwriter heroes had all gone through there. It wasn't that far away from Toronto. It was about 10, 11 hours. And the most key part was I had a distant family relative, not that distant, but a second cousin, my parents' age, who lived there, and they said I could come stay with them for a couple of weeks.
Oh, right on.
It's going somewhere without knowing anybody is very intimidating. If you sort of know one person, that helps a lot. So I just did that, and yeah. So to answer the question, yeah, at first I just thought I need to go somewhere, and then I thought I need to go somewhere and just start a whole new career because it's just kind of dead ending here.
Where do you think that? Yeah, where do you think that? To hear you say that you were into the rehearsing, you were into the lugging the gear, you were into the parts of the work that aren't as glamorous. You were into that stuff. Where do you think that came from? Like, what was the spark for that? Or did you have like a work ethic already of some sort of a hard scrabble to you? Or was there something about that particular work that appealed to you?
Yeah, I didn't really have a work ethic at all, except for music, like at all. I still don't. Except for me, except
music.
Yeah. Well, it was just the world that I wanted to be part of. It was just what I wanted to do. And I recognized even if I was lugging an amp up a cold flight of stairs, trying to get into through like a snow, over a ramp covered in icy snow to a venue, that was just, that was what I wanted to be doing. So I just kind of recognized that was part of it. And compared to what I was doing all the other hours of the day, which was basically wishing I could be somebody else, doing something else, not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It was, I don't know, glamorous, not glamorous, glorious. It was just
fulfilling. It sounds like, because I think like one of the things that, I've developed a work ethic, just kind of generally speaking now, but it took me until probably my 30s to get there, late 20s at least, but probably my early 30s before I got to that point. And really, I think a lot of that was just sort of necessity at some point where I was like, okay, I got bills and I need to take care of things. And so I have to develop that. But as a kid, I wasn't a bad student. I was a decent student. I wasn't afraid to work, but the only thing I really busted my ass with, and I truly had a dedication to the craft, was sports. So for me, it was sports instead of music. It was like, I'd be the last guy in the batting cage every single day, and I would be the one running the extra miles during cross country season on the weekend, doing all the right things for my body. That's where I channeled it, but it wasn't like a natural, I don't know. Like I talk to some people who just have it. Like they just want to bust their ass all the time. Like they're working all the time. Doesn't matter what it is, they want to work. And for me, it feels like similar to what you're saying. It had to be focused on a specific thing. And that specific thing to me had to be fulfilling. Like the work had to matter to me.
100%. I've always had this issue of just not being able to focus on something that I wasn't really into. And actually, when I was a kid, I was actually very into sports also.
Oh, nice.
Hockey and that was something else that I put a lot of time and work into, because I did love it a lot. But yeah, if it's something I'm not interested in, it's very, very hard for me to focus, unless it's to meet ends like you're talking. I mean, I have a family now, so I do have to make money. So there are times when I have to just buckle down and do whatever I need to do.
Right.
But it's a challenge. And so, yeah, I didn't have like the older brother either. I had friends with the key older brother who had the record collection, and they had all the cooler records before I did. I kind of just started, I wanted to play drums. I didn't have any drums. I would just start to put together a kit with, like Frisbees and trash can lids and things like that. And then just building it up to be as close as possible, because I didn't have any money. I was like 9,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
9, no work ethic. No way to go out there and make money.
Right. Uh, and but my mother, I guess she recognized that. I mean, there was sort of this dynamic where, like like I mentioned, my parents, all of a sudden it was my mother and me mostly.
Mm.
And I guess she recognized that I was into this. And so she wanted to try to help me fill the hole that she knew was there. Um,
Mm.
and so she went out and somewhere somehow found a snare drum with a cymbal on it. So I had this like prized possession to go with my frisbees and the trash cans. I had an actual drum, and that was exciting. And then somewhere I managed to get hold of a floor tom, and eventually I had a whole kit. But I did have to piece it together and figure out how to do this on my own. But it was very rewarding. I mean, I felt like, you know, I mean, it may as well have been like an Alex Van Halen kit to me, just having two or three drums there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Man, you just mentioned like it can come up in all kinds of contexts, that idea of holes and having to needing to fill those holes. For you, it was this family situation that you found yourself in. For other folks, it could be like, for me, it was sports ending. Once my baseball career was over, trying to, as Towns Van Zandt says, we all got holes to fill. Them holes is all that's real. Like when you have those holes, finding healthy outlets to fill those holes is so important as a young person. And so often, if you don't have the guidance of someone pointing you in the right direction, it can turn to alcohol or drugs or whatever the thing is that's self-loathing, whatever it is. But it's great that your mom had recognized that and had that music there and encouraged that. That's a gift.
Yeah, looking back on it, she let me have the furnace room all to myself. And I can play there as loud and as much as I wanted. And I also used to put, I mean, I guess a lot of kids did this, but put together a microphone stand and out of a hockey stick and stuff, and just leap around the living room to records and play them really loud and lipped around. And she had no problems with it, which is pretty cool. And then later in high school, when I had an actual band and we'd play in the basement, and it was so loud in our house. And looking back, I don't understand how she put up with it, because I remember like we'd just be playing away, and I'd go upstairs to get something, and she'd be lying there like on the couch trying to watch TV, and it was just so loud because the other guys were still down there playing, and I thank her every time I see her still for putting up with that, because it couldn't have been fun.
That's great. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
So if we could, I want to dive into the record a little bit, but before we do that, we got to the place where you're in New York, and now you're in Nashville. How did that journey happen? How did you end up in Music City?
Well, I was in New York, a total of about 8 or 9 years.
Okay, significant amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the time, it felt for me like it kind of ran its course.
Hmm.
You probably, I don't know. I found this after. It seems like a lot of people move there in their 20s, and by their 30s, they're kind of gone.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way at all. But
Mhm.
when I look back now, all the friends I had that were there and whatnot, the only ones that are still there are the ones that actually are from there. Everybody else just kind of moved on through.
Mhm.
But I just, it was starting to get a little more expensive, and I didn't actually move to Nashville. I moved to Austin, Texas.
Right.
And that was just on the recommendation of a friend. And I went down there to check it out, and I liked it a lot. So I moved down, and I fell in love with Austin, Texas in the time I was there. Completely unexpected. Like I would have never thought that I would have ended up there. And that was about 7 or 8 years too. And then I moved here because there were a couple of reasons. I was starting to. I understood there was a different world going on up here with regards to songwriting and publishing, and people being able to like publish their songs and maybe just get paid to write songs, or their catalog would be actually worth, the catalog could actually work for them. I didn't know too much about how that worked, but I wanted to see. And then I was starting to tour in Texas a fair bit. which was going well. And then um, there was a booking agency that was based near here that was interested in working with me, and I was all into that. And they wanted to, they'd be able to book me all over the Southeast and stuff. So I moved up here to kind of work with them and to see about the publishing stuff. And then,
All right. So you've lived in three of America's greatest music cities: New York, Austin, Nashville. Three of the places that people go to make music, people go to listen to music. Three of the great music cities. Of those three, which one musically was the most has been the most sort of nurturing for you, or the most fulfilling for you creatively?
That's a good question. I would say, well, I have to say the level of musicianship in Nashville is the best I've seen anywhere in the world, in terms of like the baseline level of people making music here is ridiculous. And you get spoiled here and forget sometimes when you go out elsewhere, and you just see people, you just realize how spoiled we are here with the level of musicianship. So I have to say that's really something special. Austin was a really special place, and I really absorbed Texas music and the history of music from Texas, and what can I say? It just kind of it's in the wind there, and it's really special. And I really loved what I learned about music living in Texas. But I feel like I kind of got better once I got to Nashville. Like I sort of took all that and then managed to, I don't know, reflect on it and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of, marinade in it.
There you go.
And I'd say really a combination of the two. And New York was amazing also, but entirely different. But all three are very exciting. You're right. Like, I mean, they're very good places to play music and learn about music and be a musician. You can't go wrong with any of them.
Yeah, they're three of my favorite cities I've been to in the world. And as much as I can, I mean, they're places I revisit as often as possible. I was in Austin it was last March, like for the South by Southwest EDU, for the educational South by Southwest. I was out there for 4 or 5 days, and it's just everything. It's in the air. There's something about that place. And Americana Fest a couple years ago in Nashville, again, just these moments where I'm like, we're pretty fortunate here in Orlando. We have like a underappreciated and music scene, but when you go to those places, you feel just that there's a difference. Is there because when I'm picturing, and then I know this is true for some of our guests and our friends, like for example, your album release show, if I'm not mistaken, you had our friend Lainey Jones played that night, and I see the names on these bills when people are playing. Is it the romantic version of Nashville that I picture and I read about? Like, are you constantly going over to folks' houses and like swapping ideas and picking and sitting in with people, when they're playing shows, that kind of thing?
Well, that definitely happens. I don't do as much of that as I probably would like to. Again, because I have a family, and there's I can't do that as much as I'd like to. But if you ask other people, the answer would be yes.
Yeah,
I do. And I have gone over to Lainey and Brian's house and hung out and jammed, and they've come over here. And I mean, it happens. And whenever I'm part of things like that, I just think, God, I wish there's a way I could just be, I know how cool this is. And in Austin, it was like that. But yeah, I know there's a lot of that because everybody lives close together here. It's small, and 95% of the musicians that I know live basically in one of two areas, which are right next to each other. And so it's easy to get around and hang out with people. And then all the venues are all in the same kind of area too, for the most part. So
yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great to be around that creative energy. My partner's a visual artist, and a woodworker, and she does painting and woodworking and all these amazing things, sculpting, and she's also a singer. And so like right now she's making stuff, and so like just being around that energy makes such a big difference. So it's cool that you have it kind of in spades there. We're running out of time since we are a DIY operation and we don't pay for Zoom. But I did want to ask you about my favorite song on the record is the title track, "Power Up," and I think it just like it just gets me in a good place. It gets me in a good headspace, and so I just wanted to ask you about that particular song, how it came together, and how you end up deciding for it to lead off the record and be the title track.
Yeah, well, that was, like I say, that was the first song we did, and essentially, I was over there hanging out, and Scott came downstairs, and he has bass in his one hand, a little amp, or his bass over his shoulder, and his amp in his hand, and he said, "Okay, so yesterday, we took an old TV to the repair place, try to get it fixed, and the guy kept saying, man," he kept plugging in. He said, "Man, it just won't power up. It just won't power up," and he said, "So I think we got to do something with that." I said, "Oh, okay." And so I don't know. We just very quickly said it's got to be this funky thing, and the chorus is just going to say "power up." We're just going to say "power up, power up," and then we're each going to write a verse, and then, well, no, first he just got behind his drums. He turned on all his recording equipment. He got behind his drums, and I picked up his guitar, and he turned on his stuff, and we just jammed. He just found a groove, and we just jammed for about 15, 20 minutes. And I was trying to come up with a riff and then like a counter riff over it. And we just did that. And then he said, "Okay, you write a verse and I'll write a verse, and come over in a couple of days and we'll each sing the verse." I said, "Okay." So we each had a verse. His was the first verse. Mine was the second verse. And he sang his, and then I sang mine. And originally we thought, well, we'll record this, and it'll be like the two of us, our song, kind of. And then we ended up using all the different attempts at making the riff ended up being in the song, and it just never really got settled. It just ended up like that. It was much more exciting. And then once we started doing other songs, it was actually him that said, "Hey, you should put this on your record." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, just sing the first verse and it'll just be yours." And I said, "Okay, sure." And so we did that. And then my idea was just to have it be the last song on the record, just like almost like, remember in the days when CDs first came out and they were so long that there'd be like hidden bonus tracks.
Yeah.
Up to 74 minutes, and there'd be like 3 minutes of silence and then this little song.
Yeah.
We were going to leave the silence, but I thought it would just be the last song. And that we'd call the album that, and it would just be kind of quirky. And then it wasn't until like got to the very end, probably, I don't know, once we were mastering it, where I just thought, this song really needs to be first. It just needs to be the first song. Like, it's just so different, and it grabs you in, and some people might not like it, some people might really like it, and it just seems to be an attention getter. So I just decided to make it the first record, or the first song.
That's great, man. Yeah, I haven't thought about the hidden tracks on CDs in a long time. I'm not usually nostalgic for the past. I think we're better off as a society now than we were when CDs had hidden tracks. But I do think I'm somewhat nostalgic for those. Like, I remember Green Day's Dookie had one, and then there was like a Gary Allan record was the first country record that I remember having one. There was something kind of fun and like mysterious about that. All right, so we only have 2 minutes left. Rapid fire. What are you getting down on? What's the music or art that has you inspired at the moment?
I've been on a massive Thin Lizzy kick for about a year and a half now.
Okay.
I just can't stray too far from it. In between that and Kathleen Edwards, also I've been listening to a ton, and I'd say probably those two been the thing lately.
I'm glad you said that, because Thin Lizzy is one of those bands I just don't know that well. Like, every time I listen, I go, "Oh yeah, I should do a dive into this. This is my shit." And then Kathleen Edwards is a name that comes up all the time that I just don't know anything about. I'm just Kathleen Edwards dumb. So I'll fix that.
Yeah,
cool. David, this has been a pleasure, man. Thank you for sticking with me on all of this and rescheduling and being such a sweetheart. I really appreciate it. Your record's wonderful, and all of your records are wonderful. And this particular one has been a big part of my life over the last month or two. And I'm just really, really thankful for your time and energy, man.
Well, thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it. And the podcast is really cool, and I appreciate you having me on it. And
Thank you, dude. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. It always blows my mind that people care, and they do, and I'm really grateful.
But those days are gone, just my luck. You can change the wires, you can hypnotize, you can plug it in, it won't power up. Good God, power up. Baby, this thing won't power up.
David Newbould, y'all. Thank you so much, David. Thank all of you for listening. DavidNewbould.com for all things David Newbould, including that wonderful record we spent so much time talking about, Power Up. The song you're hearing in this episode is the title track from that album. The whole thing is killer. Go out and get you a copy, davidnewbould.com. Marinadepodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, which needs to be updated, and more. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We love interacting on those channels. I'm especially active on Twitter, but if you send me a message or tag the show, or retweet, whatever you do, I'm going to see it on any of those channels, and I really appreciate all those interactions. I really appreciate the love that y'all give the show. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support the Marinade. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the Marinade. We have a brand new, just have 2 episodes so far, monthly show called What We're Getting Down On, which is a conversation between myself and my great friend Peter Haraldson. The first episode is available for free at patreon.com/Marinade Podcast or in your normal Marinade Podcast feed. We also just released episode 2 yesterday. Episode 2, they were both a blast. Episode 2 was so much fun. We had too much fun. Peter is an incredible human being and so creative and so funny. He talked about one of his favorite comic book writers, and I talked about Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which is one of my favorite records from last year. And I kind of wanted to talk about just hip hop in general and what that's looked like in my life, and how different my consumption of hip hop is now versus how it was when I was a kid. I think y'all are going to dig it. We're having a blast making it. We hope you're enjoying listening. That's at patreon.com/Marinade Podcast if you're interested and can swing it. I also have a show called Inner Child, where I've been asking our guests to stick around for a little bit after the feature episode. And I'd ask them childlike questions. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite TV show? Stuff like that. And it's just a way to be a little bit sillier. The Marinade can get heavy sometimes, right? That's just the nature of me and the show. And so Inner Child is a chance to just kind of get silly. And I'm really having fun with that as well. We have 2 of those episodes up. So there's a lot of stuff over on Patreon that I think you'll dig. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, which is what Patreon is, you can Venmo or PayPal us at the Marinade. All the money goes right back into the show. And I really appreciate everybody who supports us in that way. But I also am just thankful that you're listening, right? So this show will always be free and available for you on your normal podcast feed, whatever app you prefer. And I'm just so thankful that y'all listen and you spread the word, and we continue to have these amazing opportunities. I just recorded with Justin Wells last night, and I got to see him open for Lucero here in Orlando. Amazing night, a Sunday night early show. So much fun. Justin is an incredible performer, an amazing songwriter, and just a dear, sweet, kind guy. Like, he came over to the house, and I feel like it tells you a lot about a person when you see them interact with someone's pets, right? Especially dogs. And I'm partial to dogs, of course. I love my dogs, but Conundrum can be a handful, right? He can be a challenge, and Justin was just super mindful of that and was very patient with him and sweet to him, and it just showed a lot of his character last night. And also, we just recorded the most killer episode. So we got some other cool things in the works. Some stuff I can't tell you about necessarily yet, although I did maybe leak some pretty big news on what we're getting down on episode 2 last night over on Patreon. But with just so many great things. That episode with Justin's on the way. I'm going to record with Sammy K later this week. Really excited for that. And just, again, really grateful that y'all continue to support the show, continue to spread the word about the show. Thank you so much. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.